just again, welcome everyone. It'll be good to get an indication from those in the room which region you represent or which town you're joining us from. Today is really a very important engagement around the HPP's economic advancement pillar. That pillar has got four sub pillars or subcategories, which will be presented today by the esteemed panelists and presenters. You will have an opportunity to participate through the Q&A. So I please encourage everyone to be able to drop their questions at the Q&A, on the Q&A box, and also during our engagements to be able to raise your hand whenever there's a particular question you would like to ask. With that said, and once again, welcome everyone, let me hand over to Ms. Desiree Matthias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of the Office of the President's Youth Engagement Forum. It's such a great joy to connect with all of you today. Thanks to technology, we are able to connect from the length and the breadth of the country. We're pleased to have so much diversity in the room, and looking at the chat box, we've got great representation from the regions. You're all welcome. I see that we've got Oshana region, we've got Grootfontein, Ochodonjupa, we've got Omaruru, Erongo, Ocho, Kunene, we've got Tsumeb, Oshikoto region, of course, Komas region. So Erongo region, I see you, Swakopmund. This is great. We're so happy that you have reciprocated, accepted our invitation, and that you are joining us for this important conversation. It's really consistent with our president's style of consultation. He always wants us to consult inclusively to make sure that there's representation from the broad spectrum of our society, and to make sure that planning is informed from a bottom-up approach by the lived realities of the intended beneficiaries and implementers of the plan. So it's good that there's diversity in the room, and I want to acknowledge all of you. Thank you again for accepting our invitation. Our effort is made to consult on this policy that is really of national importance. I convey greetings from His Excellency the President. He's aware that we are here together, and he wishes us a very productive and robust engagement. We're also honored, and I'm not sure if the Minister of Finance is here yet, but he will be dialing in shortly as one of our keynote listeners for this afternoon. We're also joined, and I would like to acknowledge the presence of my colleague, the President's Economic Advisor, and also other senior colleagues and advisors to the President who are here. I recognize our senior government officials who are joining this call from the Ministries of Finance, Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Industry, from our Ministry of International Relations. I see a number of colleagues here. Thank you for taking the time and availing yourselves. I want to point you to the Q&A box where you can ask more pointed and direct questions specifically to government officials. And we've created that space so that we can use the floor time to really have a conversation and to hear your inputs and contributions. We will clarify where there are questions required, but we prefer to do so mostly using the Q&A box. For today, for a change, the government officials who are here are keynote listeners. Really, the keynote address is to be delivered by you, the participants. This is your meeting. Why are we here? Just a little bit of context setting. I did indicate that this is the third edition of the Youth Engagement Forum by the Office of the President. And these forums came into existence last year on the request of the young people. His Excellency the President had a town hall meeting at the National Theatre in November of 2019, where you specifically requested that these forums be institutionalized in the Office of the President so that you can have a direct engagement space, and that he has obliged. But also in the 2020 State of the Nation address delivered in June, His Excellency committed to undertake a process of review and consultation towards formulating the next priority plan of government for his second and final term of office. The Harambee Prosperity Plan, as we knew it, lapsed on the 20th of March 2020. And the Office of the President, together with government ministries, offices, and agencies, have now commenced broad stakeholder consultations ranging from government, business sector, academia, subject matter experts, and of course, the reason we're here today, the youth. The intention of these consultations is twofold. We're reviewing the progress that we have made, we're reviewing the priorities that are contained in the plan, and we're also soliciting your fresh perspectives on what else is a new and emerging issue that could and should inform our development agenda going forward. There are also a number of resource documents that underpin and inform the development plan, the ruling party's manifesto, the recommendations from the high-level panel on the Namibian economy. These are all going to also be source documents to inform the plan. And the outcomes from the consultation that we're having here with you today. So these focused discussions that we're having today are really in fulfillment of this undertaking and commitment by the president. Young Namibians are a large and a very important stakeholder, and we should play a central role in reviewing the progress made and also in shaping our agenda going forward. So much has to do with the bearings today, how it affects our daily life, but also the prospects for our future. So a little bit of the approach that I would like to share. As you may be aware, the Harambee Prosperity Plan is constructed on 5 pillars. And these 5 pillars that are thematically titled are also known as the critical success factors in order for government to achieve on its sustainable development agenda, but also to deliver on the mandate of prosperity. The 5 pillars are effective governance, economic advancement, social progression, infrastructure development, and international relations. So in order for us to have a quality engagement, because they are so broad, we have broken it up and these consultations are being conducted pillar by pillar. We started on Monday and we concluded our first consultation on effective governance and international relations. So we have already reviewed 2 pillars and we are receiving positive feedback from Monday's exchange and that session. The event was well attended. I think we had at least 160 participants in the room. And from what I can see now is that we're going to have a much larger turnout for today's event, which is really well subscribed, and we're pleased to note that. My feedback to you is that from the experience we had on Monday is that the engagement was effective. The young people who came made a positive contribution. Everybody, the presenters, the moderator, the participants, yourselves, you came prepared. You're well informed. You brought us your fresh perspectives, and you did so with clarity of mind and purpose. And we're hoping for the same outcome from today's session on economic advancement. It's going to be robust. We're dealing with bread and butter issues. Why are we doing this? Our theme is crafting a common youth agenda, and we are really here to put heads together to shape our country's economic reform and recovery agenda. There's an opportunity for us to influence that policy framework, and we want to design tomorrow together. So much has changed in the world around us in the last 4 years from the first Harambee Prosperity Plan, but more has changed in the last 6 to 8 months with the outbreak of this global pandemic. And as government, we recognize that we need to be agile, we need to be nimble, we need to be responsive to the changing situation. And we want this plan to espouse those aspirations. Even in the best of times, young people already face disproportionate challenges, and now their vulnerabilities have really only been exacerbated. We are not a homogeneous group. We have unique challenges, but we also have unique opportunities. And although the information is there, the data is there, and there are some facts about the social and the economic and the political impacts and dimensions on the prevailing economic circumstances, we don't want to make the assumption and make the mistake that we understand and we know it all. We don't want to be presumptuous. And that is exactly why we're here today, is to talk to ourselves, to engage in a candid conversation on what has worked for us in the last 4 years. What is it that is not working, and how can we reform what's not working? And what are the new issues? What are the contemporary issues, emerging issues that are affecting us that also need to be considered? That is why we're here today. Our commitment to you is that the single-minded objective of these sessions is that we want to mainstream matters that are affecting young people. We want to place emphasis on the areas that are affecting most of the young people in policy priority. Our commitment is that this engagement today is going to be meaningful. It will inform and influence and shape the national policy framework. And our commitment to you is that we're going to validate these outcomes and seek consensus and build consensus so that we can have a truly common youth agenda for the country. With these few remarks, I would now yield back to our moderator to take us through the rest of the program. Thank you so much again for being here, and we look forward to this engagement today.
Thank you, Desiree, and thank you to all of you for your eagerness in participation. I do take note of questions already coming in. And just as I outlined the program for today, I also want to let you know that there will be an opportunity for your questions to be addressed or your comments or observations. We will be having two presenters who will present around HPP's economic advancement pillar, after which we will have an open floor for contributions. I'd like to emphasize that we keep the conversation as constructive as possible. As Desiree rightly pointed out, this is an opportunity to come into the conversation around solutions. There is a saying amongst the youth that if not by us, then not for us. So today is really an opportunity for us to live up to that mantra, taking cognizance of the fact that the youth form about 36% of Namibia's population. So really a very key stakeholder, and we encourage a robust discussion. With that said, I would like to introduce our first presenter, that is Ms. Josephine Shikongo Asino. She is a development finance expert, really a field that is gaining ground over the past few years, and especially around finding solutions that are developmental, but also make economic sense. Josephine, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josephine Shikongo Asino, and it is such a pleasure to be here today with everyone. And I'm really excited to share my thoughts on this pillar that is very important. So I would like to acknowledge all the protocols in the room and then proceed on with my presentation. We are talking about the economic advancement pillar, which is really one of the important, I believe, pillars that we have in the Harambee Prosperity Plan. And I will take you through the review and the highlights of the Harambee Prosperity Plan first term, what has happened, what has been achieved, what has not been achieved. We'll look at some areas of improvement. And then we will have recommendations for the second term. Why do I think this pillar is important? I think this is the pillar that deals with government funds. It's the pillar that deals with revenue and expenditure. It's the pillar that also deals with entrepreneurship and higher education, two issues that I think are very crucial to young people. The pillar has 4 sub-pillars, and I'm going to go through all of them throughout the presentation. So looking at what has happened in the past, we have had 12 desired outcomes, and we have only managed to meet 5 of those, which puts that at 42%. And we also had 54 activities, of which only 29 were executed, putting at the 54% execution rate. This is really due to the high I mean, the low economic growth that the country has been experiencing, and we hope that we can do better coming the next term. Although I think the activities were they were very robust, they were very very detailed, and I think the ones that have been achieved really have managed to have some significant impact to the young people of the country. So we look at what has been achieved so far. We have managed to maintain our import coverage for 3 months. We have attracted 10 investment projects, although the target was 7. We have increased access to finance for the young people. We have also established the credit guarantee scheme, which I think is a very important aspect. And then we have also established 121 rural youth enterprises across the country, which have also created about 1,000 jobs. What should be continued in this plan, if we look at it, what is in there now, what I think can go ahead and still be presented in the second term? The regional projects that are going on, I think there's Kietmans, Walfish Bay, I think those ones can really just be monitored. Land provision efforts, I think that's an ongoing conversation that will probably take more than one term to fix. Investment promotion, I think this is an area that we have to continue. Although we have attracted investments in the previous term, we cannot stop this. We have to continue to ensure that our country is investor friendly. We have to continue to attract as many investors as we can. Rural youth enterprises, again, I think this is brilliant and should be continued. BIPA, I think it's one of those bodies that really can impact competitiveness of the country and as well as the ease of doing business. And I think its efficiency will be very, very crucial in the second term. The credit guarantee scheme, again, I believe it needs to continue and be expanded to reach as many young people as possible. The question really is awareness and access, because I believe there's young people who still don't know that this exists or how to get to it. So I think that should be the focus, to ensure that the young people have access and they are aware that there's this item that they can take advantage of. The wage bill, although there's great strides made to reduce this, I think we need to continue to reduce this because it has a significant impact on the whole country's financials. We can look at reducing, perhaps establishing new agencies and institutions, use private sector for some activities that we can, so that we can really reduce and run a lean government. Let's look at what we have not met, the 7 targets out of the 12. The public debt, we have not met that. I think it has actually gotten really, really worse, and it's an alarming rate. We have not managed to improve our international credit rating. We have created about 4,900 jobs out of the ones that we had targeted. And then Namibia has dropped in its competitiveness worldwide. And economically empowering disadvantaged groups is also a target that still has a lot of work to be done. And then establishing SME development agencies has fallen behind in the previous term as well as increasing the volumes of locally produced goods. So the question you ask would be, what happened? Why are these targets not met? A lot of what was highlighted in the plan is that it's lack of funding. The government did not have sufficient funding to undertake these projects that they had planned. So how then do we solve this problem? I acknowledge that there's a lot of work that has been done around these issues, and including the high-level panel. And I will not go on and repeat a lot of the recommendations that were made, but I will highlight what I think is significant. So how do we fix the economy? I'm not an economist, but I think this formula is what everyone who has taken Economics 101 would look at to say, how do you grow an economy, which is looking at your consumption, household consumption, your investments, your government expenditure, and your net exports. And if we look at our country at the moment, households are already under pressure, so we cannot really expect much growth from them. Government expenditure is also at an all-time low because of the low revenues that we have. Net exports, I think that we have been running a deficit and we cannot expect any growth from there either. So where is our hope? Investments. And this can really be, whether it's external investors that we get in or new value that we create through entrepreneurship and private sector participation. I'm going to look at 4 interventions that I think can improve our economic growth. Revenue and expenditure is really the macro level of what happens with our accounts, and I'm going to touch base on that. I'm going to focus a lot on entrepreneurship and Namibia the new Equitable Economic Empowerment Bill, as well as the quality higher education, because I think entrepreneurship and higher education are really the 2 avenues through which we can, as young people, can contribute to economic advancement. So on the revenue, I believe that we had a new revenue agency established recently, a new head was just appointed. So it's really their time to implement, it's their time to ensure that we have the tax collection loopholes closed. They have to ensure that they improve all the collection avenues that are possible. However, when it comes to tax, we really need to expand our tax base. And how do you do that? It's through an enterprise-driven economy. We need to review some laws and regulation that currently hamper our investors and entrepreneurs to enter the new market. Our public enterprises, I think there's a lot of work being done here. Public Enterprise Ministry has really been appointing new young people to boards and management. And I think it's something that needs to continue to ensure that when some of those that are ready for commercialization, we have new blood, people who are ready to run. And then we have the Sovereign Wealth Fund that is mentioned in the plan. I think it's a brilliant idea. And part of this, I think, especially to start off funding it, we need to review our natural resource agreements, such as mining and fishing, to really ensure that the country as a whole benefits from its resources and can then fund other ventures. Our expenditure, lean government hiring, I think I have highlighted that already. And public enterprises, I think we are very good at establishing new public enterprises, but sometimes we establish too many that there are too many that are alike and have similar mandates. So perhaps we can look at combining those, especially the non-commercial public enterprises, so that we can cut the spending that goes through this. Efficiency, I think it speaks for itself. We need to continue. Our e-governance is doing very well, and we need to continue to leveraging technology to really ensure that our efficiency is improved so that we can reduce expenditure. State lottery is mentioned in the plan. However, looking at our current economic conditions, I'm not sure if this is if this is a project we want to take on right now. Ms. Matias mentioned that we need to look at what needs to go. I think state lottery probably needs to be placed on hold until we have some stability. Public-private partnerships, I think in the Harambee plan, there's a lot of large projects, Karibik Gemstone, Chiwarongo Garment Factory, and some industrial parks. I think given the state that government is at right now, we probably need to allow private sector participation in these large projects to really take off some pressure from the government spending. Corruption, I think we cannot speak about our expenditure without talking about corruption. We really need to close the loopholes and find ways to stop the wastage that goes through corruption. Entrepreneurship, this is really, I guess, the meat of my presentation. It's what the young people need from the Harambee plan to deliver. And currently our youth unemployment stands at 46.1%. And I do not believe that there's an employment plan that can scoop up all those people without involving entrepreneurship, without creating new enterprises that can create new value, that can create jobs, and eventually pump money into the country and have consumers who can pay taxes, businesses that can pay taxes to get more revenue. So one of the largest issues that is always raised by entrepreneurs its funding. And I think I've seen a lot of funding issues being raised under DBN or the Harambee Prosperity Plan. And I believe that DBN is a great institution and it has done a great job. However, we might have reached a point where it is to an extent overloaded, and we need to allow some private sector companies that have had that have the systems, that have had the processes to deal with SMEs, expand the mandate of SME funding beyond DBN. I guess is really my call to ensure that we can have other avenues that can reach people deeper, quicker, faster, and just to disseminate the funding to be able to reach everyone across the country. There's also a new domestic asset requirement that has pumped a lot of money in the market, but the money is struggling to find projects. So you have money on one side and your projects on one side, and there is just no bridge in between. I believe that there's probably some work done on a preparatory fund and all that. However, there's still, it's still a big challenge that funds are in the country. Yeah, a lot of young people have brilliant projects and they are not finding each other. So we need to find a bridge between these funds. I'll talk about some of that when I talk about NIEB, because young people really, their projects need patient capital. They need the funds that are coming back also need to gain a return. And I think that we have the projects. It's a matter of meeting the two. Our retail charter, I think we have done a lot of work, but our signatures are still at about 35%. So I think as much as we continue to pursue that, we need to pivot a bit and really look at what can we do for Namibia. Look for an e-commerce venture that can market Namibian products, perhaps an Amazon for Southern Africa, and really ensure that our products have their own platform. We don't have to chase people. Amazon is currently the largest retailer in the world, and it was established not long ago. So if you are not given a table, you have to come up with your own table. And I just believe it's about time we pivot and really find creative ways to market the Namibian products in the country and abroad. Barriers to entry, I think there is some contracts that are hampering, especially young people businesses, where government ministries have signed long-term sole agreement provider with certain providers. So a young person will come up with a brilliant idea, go to the ministry with a business plan, and they're like, yeah, that's great, but we have a sole provider who we have signed an agreement for this long. So the young person is blocked from entering into the market, and they cannot continue to participate. So I think some of those laws and regulations and contracts need to be reviewed. Mentoring and coaching, I think we are also doing a great job. There's a GIZ project that's highlighted in the plan. And just need to ensure, again, access. Who has access to this? How far reaching down in the region does it go? So we need to ensure that our young people all of them can be reached and mentored, because people in Bindu can attend some sessions. Someone in the village who doesn't have internet doesn't even have access to this. So really, how do we reach those people? And then once our young people have come up with their ideas, especially the rural youth enterprise that's currently running, I think we have avenues for access to markets. We have contracts like AGOA. We have the African Free Trade Agreement coming up into operation very soon. So we can definitely ensure that our young people's products have access to market. The NIEB, I know that this is already, I think, at cabinet, but I still want to give my 2 cents on it. I think this is one of the avenues that can definitely be used to empower young people. And I'm going to go through the different sections in the bill. Ownership currently is suggested at 25%. I'm suggesting that instead of asking for ownership, why don't we ask for a tax deductible donation to be made to a small business impact fund, which is then can be used as a preparatory fund, a greenfield fund, which pension fund money cannot go into, to ensure that our young people's startups are really put to a point where they are bankable and can be taken up by the big companies. Instead of asking for management control and saying, how many people do you have in your executive, why don't we ask for skills transfer, perhaps through management exchange for the state-owned enterprises, so that these people can really gain real skills while they're working at these other companies. Human resources and skills development, again, instead of asking how much have you spent on your training, why don't we ask for them to provide internship to a number of students from UNAM and NUST so that they have real job experience by the time they actually get out of university. The corporate social responsibility request of 1% of after-tax profit, I think that can be a really high ask. So it's again a matter of perhaps asking that to be a tax deductible donation to the impact fund. And I think that can make everyone feel good and everyone in the end benefits. Entrepreneurship development and marketing. This again, I think this is really them buying local products. And I think I'm okay with the suggestion in the bill at the moment. But then value addition and technology, I think this is also where they can then either sponsor a lab at a university, an innovation lab, set up some entrepreneurial academy, just something that can really impact young people instantly. Because if we talk about ownership, there's no young person who will have enough funds to go buy 25% of a large established business. So that's my view on the NIEB. And then the final aspect of my recommendations is on higher education. And I think this is really one aspect that as a country we need to take serious. For us, for our institutions to become competitive in the world and to be well ranked, we need to invest in research. That's the only way the world can recognize us. So investment in research, ensuring that our faculty have access to international grants, they participate in international research, international conferences, so that they're actually known, the bodies are out there. Now, how to fund that? There's many grants available for international faculty, African Fulbright opportunities for scholars to go do research. So I think we really need to invest in research, and this is not something that we even need to take money from. Just ensure that our faculty actually spend time and have time to engage in research. Entrepreneurship capacity at the institutions. I think all 3 universities currently have entrepreneurship programs, but again, they are not robust enough. They are either really brief, offered in 1 year, offered in 1 semester. So we really need to pump up our entrepreneurship education at institutions. International grants, I think I spoke about that. Internships, again, our education institutions working together with businesses to really ensure that our young people can get internship opportunities before they complete their education, especially those in high impact fields. We also have, I think, something called Visa for Scarce Skill in the plan, but I believe that Namibia has skills. We have a lot of skilled people, whether those are local or some of them are actually in the diaspora. We need to be able to leverage those skills. We just had an example of our NASA scientist who passed away recently. It's a Namibian guy, carried the Namibian flag. But have we ever spoken to him to take a young Namibian with him to NASA, expose him, have a young Namibian exchange program where they spend some time at NASA? So I think we have a lot of opportunities that we can leverage currently and improve and develop our capacity, improve our skills without necessarily needing to either bring in people from outside or to spend a lot of money, as might be a fear. So that's really my presentation. Just to summarize about what I have suggested: expand SME funding beyond DBN, involve private companies that have processes and systems to do SME funding, so that it can go beyond and really be reachable. Appoint competent youths to boards and management and in high capacity, which I think our president is really great at. Operationalize the Public Procurement Act, the large projects in HPPII. I think we can find some synergy with the private sector to reduce the pressure on government spending. Remove the barriers to entry which is really the sole provider agreements that are currently held. Explore e-commerce avenue for Namibian products. Stop chasing someone, make your own table and see how it goes. We have a market in Africa. Improve NIAB to really include capacity building and philanthropy. And then I think the credit guarantee scheme just need to be improved on access, and then building the bridge, the funding bridge between the money that's in the country and the projects that are with the young people. Final thoughts, there are no shortcuts. We are planning for 5 years, but really we should be planning for 100 years. But we can do what we can with this impact plan that we have today. I think as a nation, we need to continue to emphasize ethical behavior and national interest, because this is really where a lot of loopholes go through and we waste a lot. We should also stay away from institutional paralysis, starting an institution for every policy that we have. I don't think it's necessary. We have enough institutions. We have some capacity from private sector. Let's leverage that. And as a final thought, really, we cannot tax a nation into prosperity. We need to start establishing new enterprises so that they can establish new value in the economy. Thank you so much. Let's continue to talk in the Q&A section. And there's my handle for Twitter in case you want to chat. So thank you so much for the opportunity and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Josephine, for that comprehensive presentation and the forward-looking solutions that you have presented. Also, really acknowledging the fact that you touched on quite a number of issues, including access to finance, which seems to be the buzzing topic amongst a lot of young people, and looking at the Q&As coming in, that is really something that young people would want to be looked at further, to be able to deepen access to finance. Please note, everyone, that we're acknowledging your questions. Please raise your hand whenever you're able to, or when there's something that you'd like to do. The raising hand function is there. You can drop your questions on the Q&A, and we are streaming live on Facebook. I will hand over to the next presenter, after which we'll be able to then open the floor for our robust discussion and to address some of the questions and answers and your comments. Also note that where your questions are not directed necessarily to the speaker or to the presenter, we are trying our best to channel them to the relevant answering authority or person. Thank you. Nina Lowe is a lecturer at Stellenbosch University. She specializes in corporate social responsibility, change management, and strategy. She's a proud Namibian, and we'd like to just welcome her to provide her presentation. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. All protocols observed, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share kind of thinking from my own thinking, but also in discussion with a lot of my peers and kind of other Namibians in terms of how do we think about responsible prosperity and advancing our economy. I think we are also part owners of, as a youth, we are part owners. And actually, Jason, you specifically mentioned it. It's part of the plan. We don't necessarily see it as our plan as well. So it's key. This is our opportunity and to contribute. And so please do that. Please question, please comment and engage in order for us to really build into the future of Namibia. And so what I'll be talking through in terms of the economic advancement pillar is really a bit or brief review. Luckily, Josephine, thank you. You've covered lots of it. So I'll just have a very brief review and then rethinking what's required and refocusing. So in terms of the economic advancement pillar, I think it's so interesting that when you look at this, hard to look at a pillar by itself, because the whole Harambee Prosperity Plan, it's really integrated in order to actually also become a economic competitor. So all the different pillars, and then also the sub pillars within the economic advancement pillar. In terms of, I think, macroeconomic stability, maybe looking specifically at that, when we consider what we're speaking about in this pillar, public debt, import coverage, and then international credit ratings, I think the focus here must be understood that here, or in this pillar, we need to ensure that our credit worthiness and also the assessment on our the risk on the economy politics, that is the focus within this pillar, because in order to have a credit rating that says that we are investable, and that makes us deem a country that investors would want to invest in, we actually need to have credit worthiness and the risk levels also of how our country is managed and what is happening in the economy. And that actually informs economic transformation, enterprise development, and also our competitiveness. And I think it's key that we keep that in the back of our mind as well, because whether it's foreign investment or local investment, if people are excited about investing in Namibia, then the potential of creating those jobs, of diversifying the economy, and of also further developing enterprises of the investments. The review, really not going into the depth of it. So the orange is saying we haven't achieved it yet, and the orange type color, and then the green just says, oh, that's where we actually achieved the target. I think, and Josephine mentioned as well, as though in terms of the green, where we actually reach the targets with the sub-pillars and the specific activities that were taken. This doesn't mean we should start on it. I think I'm excited about, specifically when you consider the youth enterprise development. It's exciting to also note that when I speak to peers with ideas, and that's actually starting businesses, that the conversations we're having today, the conversations we had 6 years ago are completely different. I think 6 years ago, we were just starting, and people were struggling a lot more in terms of access to market, access to funding, financial instruments that actually support startups and then specific SMEs within specific industries. That conversation is completely different where we are now, which says something about the focus and also the policy enablement that definitely occurred within the sub-pillar of youth enterprise development. And there's something we need to build into and onto. And so in terms of, so I think there's a lot of things that actually were done also in terms of economic transformation. Josephine mentioned quite a few of those. And the detail is in the official review or the official report. But I think what we need to consider here is, so first of all, budget. So when you look at some of the projects that weren't able to fully be realized, budget constraints, performance and lack of performance and doing a good job in some of the kind of construction and some of the things that needed to be set up, and then also kind of long leading times in terms of getting something to operationalize. So now we've something was the construction was done, we've got the plant, we can start going, but then only 2 years later we really get someone recruited to actually work and to operate the specific manufacturing plant. So I think key there is really we need to make sure financial management is done right, which again speaks to cost containment, putting money, kind of prioritizing where we need to put the money, and then also in terms of that, actually making sure that when we do contract, that that there's actually real value being created, people are performing to a specific quality that's required, and then also really getting the move on, getting stuff done when we actually have the opportunity at hand. So in terms of just kind of taking a step back and almost looking at what do we need, what happened. So Daisy mentioned that in the past 6 years, certain things changed, but in 6 months, a lot changed. And I think it's good to kind of taking a step back and looking at that and then saying, okay, cool, if this is the context we are operating in, how does that also influence our thinking in terms of Harambee Prosperity Plan 2? And going forward, planning not only for the next 5 years, but for the foreseeable, for the unforeseen future. So for longer term, to really create prosperity for Namibia. And here, I think also looking at the different sub-pillars, globally, there's been a lot of shifts, which not only meant Namibian macroeconomic instability and kind of challenges, let's rather go for that with regards to stability. Something like COVID-19 definitely had a local effect in terms of our economic stability, but globally, there's huge impact, which demands specific types of funding. So yeah, huge impact globally. And global shifts also of kind of demographics and the age and contributing to society and the economy. Then I think more and more, and these different terms usually use when you want to discuss stakeholder capitalism or ESG considerations, so environment, social governance, triple bottom line thinking. So I think specifically, so also if you've read or if you've listened to some of the World Economic Forum discussions, they speak about growth, and a lot of that also speaks to economic transformation, but specifically in light of environmental and social and governance thinking, and then ethical management and ethical considerations, which kind of another or the phrase used is stakeholder capitalism, meaning that we consider more than just shareholders. We're considering more stakeholders when we want to create value, which really directly relates to economic transformation. So if we think about economic transformation, what are the things that it relates to? So at the moment, it does relate to circularity in our economy, so green, sustainable solutions, considering our environment. Fourth industrial revolution, which also speaks to digital and kind of how do we access digital solutions, but also progress in terms of technology. And then also equitable employment, which in Namibia is a great need, but globally, there's a lot of conversation on that, and also a need in order to really transform the economy. And then in terms of youth enterprise development, I think access is increasing, and therefore democratization of services and kind of information and education and learning. However, we are also, in terms of global shifts, still seeing that there is a great divide. So there's really a need for a focus on how do we ensure that everyone, and specifically then our young people, do have access and the ability to actually access to education, but also access in terms of information and information sharing and communities and market. Then that requires, and it requires us and also businesses being started for a great amount of agility. They need to be agile, need to be able to move and change and adapt. And then with that, funding instruments is required, and funding models that might, and here though, we speak about, and we know there's this need of funding. I think we also need to alternatively think about how do we actually fund. And I think Josephine actually mentioned when she spoke about NEEB or NEEB, the fact that, say, ownership, can't we use a contribution then of rather of funds in order to create investment and capital investment tools and instruments. So thinking alternatively about how do we collaborate in order to create this value. And scaling is also important. So once we created these enterprises, to be able to scale that for Namibia, just kind of in the comments I read, so there were questions on how Startup Namibia are they across the country, and that's also kind of how do we scale that for the whole country and not only for specific areas, and that scaling kind of in terms of all types of solutions. And then economic competitiveness, really speaking to all of that. Innovation ecosystems is required, markets in terms of labor, the size of the market, product markets, access to the market, and then also an enabling environment, definitely speaking to policy and processes and governance. And then also our people. Do we have skilled and healthy people to actually contribute and make our economy competitive? So I think these things are almost underpinning if we think about how do we consider the future and the future of development for the country. I'm not going to go into detail, but re-emphasizing, I think, the need to rethink how do we build our economy and create economic advancement and really and develop or responsible prosperity through considering our environment, through considering society, and then being very serious about our governance. Ethical management and having systems that actually feed into each other, creating more value than really and cutting on waste. So this, and you could say I had a conversation with someone that yes, we first need a proper and healthy economy, then we can consider all of these things, kind of these things being ESG elements. But I do think if we're going to develop our economy, we can develop our economy based on responsible management and ownership and stewardship of the environment, of our society, of our people, and of our governing that. So putting the necessary things in place to ensure there is proper governance. So in terms of what is required, I think this is actually a different way of putting that on the prosperity plan, and I also struggle to kind of remove the economic pillar completely from, and luckily we don't have to, but to remove it from effective governance, which is definitely required in order for us to build trust into the system, to get foreign investment, but also to get people locally excited to invest in the country. Infrastructure development is key, specifically, so all infrastructure, but I think specifically when it comes to all of it's key. I can't actually pinpoint one, although I want to pinpoint information and communications technology, just because I think in terms of learning and development, which is required in a lot of our development capability and enterprise development, that is a definite need. And then also international cooperation, because I think what have been successful stories has specifically in enterprise development is where we have partnered, where private and public have partnered together, but also with international organizations, GIZ, SAIS from Finland. And these, I mean, there's a lot of examples. And there's also local examples of companies starting up and saying, but how do we actually work together to develop our economy, and specifically with regards to enterprise development. And because we need to do this for social progression and also to build trust, because if we can build trust and therefore have and build into our stability in macroeconomics, ensure economic transformation and also enterprise development, we will also, so building this trust will enable us to source also foreign direct investment, but to also get ourselves more excited and more willing to contribute and to actually invest in our country, and really know that what we're creating and the value creating is really value for all. So if we've got this, we need to refocus. So essentially, I think, and that's also actually looking at the required, our focus within the economic pillar, I would say we actually need to continue our focus on all of the elements that's there. But maybe specifically then speaking to governance, to funding, to training and development, and how that is accessed and enabled through infrastructure and public-private partnerships. So if we consider just governance, I'm not going to go, I want to go through all of these in detail, but I'll just touch on some of it and maybe examples of how we could actually solve across all of them. But I think specifically in terms of governance, in order to be competitive and in order to actually get the enterprise development going, creating more jobs as well, we need to have proper information management systems in place. This actually also speaks to kind of the income, revenue, and tax collection. So finance and managing finances at government level, but also so ensuring that the right systems are in place so that we can actually, and that we are collecting all the income revenue that needs to be collected in order to ensure that all the bills can be covered and we can prioritize the funding and actually use the funding we are receiving from income revenue. And then also information management systems in terms of administration, and like at HPPII, where if we've got a system that we actually that can speed up the process of registration, but where we can also actually utilize to connect entrepreneurs with corporate in order to create those mentorship and coaching relationships, in order to create the development and change and transform our economy in terms of skills transfer. So if we can use the database and the information management systems to also kind of leverage links and developing links, also at public-private partnership level, which is large scale but also smaller scale. Where as I'm starting my business, I can immediately tap into where there's specific skills and who I can tap into and actually who I can learn from, and who I can also then add value to. So I think that is key. Policy is key, and I think specific policies or then acts and legislation and bills coming through, specifically considering public-private partnerships. I think the whole framework and how we think about that and finding innovative ways of making that work at a large scale and large infrastructure projects, but also smaller scale, or what we would see as smaller scale, but really people enablement at that level. Then NEAB is definitely important, so to actually get the clarity and confirmation going, so that also from an investor perspective, we can be sure of what is to be expected, so that foreign investment can also they can be sure of what it will mean when they invest in the country, which is key. And then also the Namibia Investment Promotion Act, which I think is linked to that. All of these policies, and then also the National Youth Entrepreneurship Policy, but all of these will enable and create an environment where it's easier to develop and focus on these other areas that we want to focus on within the economic pillar. I think implementation is key. So what we've seen is that we've got amazing plans in place, but we actually need to implement. We need to also build trust in the system because we're getting stuff done. And then on that, as we implement, to also monitor and evaluate, to ensure that the performance delivery is there, the quality that we want and that we need is there, and that's also predetermined already as we go into projects and as we go into collaborative partnerships. So maybe an example, I think, because there's a lot of other detail that we can go into, and luckily, thanks Josephine, you've actually touched on a lot of these things as well. But I want to take an example. So say the equipment aid scheme that's currently going. So if we can say make use of that scheme, we can make use of the SME parks and the infrastructure that's already available there. We can make use of the from a public-private partnership perspective, really using infrastructure, but also business management and then funding. So how do we partner with private entities from a public perspective in order to also build on business management capacity and then the funding structures, and then adding ICT to that. So what we can then do is to ramp up enterprise development in construction and in manufacturing by making use of these different things that we already have available: the equipment aid scheme, SME park infrastructure, ICT infrastructure and kind of collaboration, and then also specific funding mechanisms that's already there. And I think more and more we should look at these, the combination of these things that we already have at hand in terms of infrastructure, in terms of private skills and funding that's available, and in terms of public funding that's available, and also the skills from a public perspective, combining that and really ensuring that the public-private partnerships that we create can really add value to enterprise development, to transforming the economy. A lot of things being said, and I think I also realize that every time I get excited, then I realize, because there's so much that's already working, but also the potential where we are, so much more that can work if we commit to actually creating value-adding partnerships that creates value for the environment, for society, with the right governance in place in order to create value for all. And that, I think, that is I think with that I will conclude this presentation, and thank you so much again for the opportunity. And I would really like kind of more specific also ideas in terms of how do we create these partnerships and collaboration in order to create the value to strengthen our economy and rebuild and build it back better, if you want. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nina, for that presentation and for your holistic view in terms of solutions, not only looking at the environment as in people, but also the environment as in nature, and bringing in principles that could aid the betterment of what we're trying to do. So thank you very much for that, Nina. As I had said earlier, some of the questions are not relevant directly to the presenters. We are forwarding them to the correct channels. And some of the questions that you have asked, which are very pertinent, we will have an opportunity just now for the presenters to respond. But before we do that, I'd like to hand over to Desiree, who would like to just give some comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, and thank you to our two presenters, Nina and Josephine, for those excellent interventions. You have covered a lot. Economic advancement pillar is a really broad pillar that talks on a wide-ranging number of issues. So I think what I want to do in my reaction is and also to guide the conversation as we unpack, because we want to be as focused and to do deep dives into the issues that are affecting us, but we also want to cover as much ground as possible. The first thing that you pointed out, which is important, is the planning exercise and the need to rethink and refocus towards a more prosperous future beyond just a 5-year term. This plan is likely to be a 4-year plan. The current government administration will expire in 2025. But we do need to plan beyond 2025. And what I do want to contextualize is that this plan is pegged directly to this administration. In 2022, the NDP 6 is due to expire, and that process is also beginning on how we are going to restructure the economy to make some quantum leaps towards Vision 2030. As you are aware, NDP 6 will be the second last national development plan before we reach our Vision 2030. So it's going to be quite an instrumental plan. It's a plan that we also intend to consult we can But what I want to highlight is that to begin to reimagine ideas and assumptions about both the meaning and the drivers of development, and that we see it's giving us an opportunity, new openings for us to open public policy debate on many of the critical issues that are affecting the integration of our economy with the social impact. And we must use the lessons that we're drawing from the current challenges so that we can face and also reframe them as opportunities for growth and improvement and progress. I want to make that point. However, for today's exercise, we need to manage expectations. We are discussing reform, we're discussing recovery, but the presenters also highlighted that the economic advancement pillar is the pillar that performed the lowest in the Harambee Prosperity Plan. And this is because of the prevailing circumstances, some of them independent intervening variables, some of them domestic implementation issues, as they highlighted. They highlighted budget constraints, efficiency and effectiveness of implementation, and they highlighted the delays in operationalization or delays in decision making. These are the things that our colleagues are saying held us back. But we cannot look at it in a vacuum. Even as our debt to GDP ratio is increasing, it is increasing contextually that the entire region is in the same kind of situation. The entire world has to borrow more money in order for them to respond to the current public health emergency. So there are real drivers behind some of these, you could say, underperformances. But what I want us to focus on as we discuss today is that in order for us to recover and begin to enjoy growth, we need to look at regaining fiscal stability, and we're open to a discussion on that. The second thing is the structural economic reforms. What are the impediments that are holding back enterprise development? We need to look at how to, if we may, contain public expenditure, how we can generate and collect more revenue. We need to look at how to build some reserves and buffers in our economy so that we don't find ourselves in a vulnerable situation where our sovereignty becomes at risk. We need to look at different public sector reforms. We need to look at improving productivity, how we can get more. What I want us to keep in our minds is that if the Harambee Prosperity Plan during 2016 to 2020, particularly the economic advancement pillar, could not achieve most of the development objectives as far as economic transformation, industrialization, and implementing projects was concerned because of fiscal constraints, because of constraints. At the time we were experiencing today on the back of economy. So let us identify ideas that will give us most bang for buck, that will stretch the dollar, that will reach and impact most of the Namibians, and that, you know, are low-hanging fruit, things that we can implement in the next 36 to 48 months. Because of the situation now with increasing joblessness and exclusion from the labor force of young people. This is how I would like us to frame the conversation as we now begin to open the floor for discussions, comments, reactions, observations, ideas, contributions. Moderator, please, I yield the floor back to you. Thank you.
From Inocencio Verde, we take note, and I see the presidential advisor on the economy, James, has responded and acknowledged to you during the chat. We take note of your input around expanding the idea on artisanal fishing and small-scale fishing as an opportunity in Namibia to be able to bring in more people to participate in the fishing industry at a grassroots level, and to review the Marine Resources Act in that regard, which only makes it permissible for recreational fishing, currently dependent on where you're fishing. So we take note of that. Thanks a lot for that. Again, just one question more again to Josephine from Verna, just around the manufacturing policy in the country, and if they are actually apt for take note of that. Perhaps Josephine can touch on that. And then from Florine, see that it was in response to Josephine's presentation, where you make mention that DBN must be empowered with function to do more awareness of various funding. I think for now, perhaps before I add towards Nina, Josephine, perhaps just your response on some of those questions.
Thank you, Jason. I see that Ms. Ndita Nipondoka Rabioti is in the room, so I think I would like to pass on the manufacturing policy question to her. On the DBN question, I do agree DBN needs to be empowered. And I believe DBN has really done a magnificent job. I trust they have. I, however, truly believe that they can be supported better by private sector who have the systems and processes to do exactly the same thing and to ensure that it reaches as many people as possible, especially in the regions, and just to not have too much pressure on one institution, because it's doing so much. There's many mandates trusted with DBN, and I think to ensure that we do not burden an institution and that we do not find ourselves with, again, people complaining that DBN is being ineffective. I think we can leverage on the private sector capacity that's available to take on this function as well.
Thank you, Josephine. Note of your input and reliant Namibia. So Nina will probably expand on that a bit more. We take note from Leroy, you're increasing the entrepreneurship drive. You're talking about seed capital for awareness about around activities and initiatives inside. We take note of that and generalities for local artisans. You to elaborate more on the self-reliance and increase as an avenue for economic advancement.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I actually saw that and I thought that's exactly. I was starting to type. I agree, because I think it's so key that as we do need to build self-reliance internally. I think it is a combination. So luckily, no solution will there won't only be one solution. In terms of self-reliance, and that's maybe I think where partnership should come on. And I'm actually going to kind of incorporate my answer a bit on the opportunities currently, specifically in the SME and the startup space as a start. Because I think, so these various, the comment was made on business plan competitions and feasibility funds linked to that. So at the moment, so I'm not necessarily aware of all of them, but the DBN actually have a good, or there was one last year, I'm not sure about this year, but a competition for business plans and businesses starting out, which is a competition you can present, and there's also an amount of grant funding and loan application involved in that. Then there's also SAIS, Southern African or Innovation, and so SAIS, they've got a call for proposals that's currently open. and where they also call for business plans and specific entities, they actually look at regional development. So not Namibia only, they actually want to develop the region. So it's when you work with across borders. Then there's also the GIZ Startup Namibia, where they're looking at different avenues, amazing avenues. And there's luckily Gerald's here, so please also ask questions and comment. But there's various things that they're actually doing to support entrepreneurs in starting businesses. And also on that, the different, so sorry, stop there. So GIZ is also there. And then there's also entities like Dololo, where startups, it's kind of peer learning and kind of really developing skills and pushing entities forward, and to see also how do you build business plans and business models that can actually get finance. So I think, and that's only some of them, or some of the competitions currently at WEB. So please, if there's more, please add those in the comments. I think that's a start. And I think, these are also focused on different industries, some of them manufacturing, some of them tech, and more kind of research focused solutions. And the NCRST, our own, that's also another, or they also have an arm and focus for this. So there's definitely different entities that's really building in on skills, and to provide funding in different ways, which hopefully will also build into kind of making Namibians build into our own economy. I think another, and a good example actually is the Mashara irrigation project, which is a Namibian project, PPP, and the first blueberries were picked this year, or the first harvest was done. And I think solutions like that, so in agriculture, in tourism, in ecotourism, that's things that we've got in Namibia. Arts and culture, there was construction, I think, in Keetmans and in Walvis Bay on specific spaces for film making, and infrastructure for filmmaking. And I think we've got an amazing scope for that. So I think there's definitely, we've got, the country itself, kind of our land and what we've got, offers us with a lot of opportunities to actually build in the country. We do have resources, a lot of it, kind of mineral resources, although I do think we need to, or there's a drive for diversification from that. I think I spoke to the various elements. Jason.
Thank you, Nina.
Cool.
Thanks for that response. I know you've been patiently waiting in the audience. I see 3 hands that have been raised. I will start with Robert Shipanga. Please raise your comment, question, observation. Robert? Okay, it seems that Robert is not with us, perhaps. I can, in the meantime, is he coming? Okay.
No. Hello?
Yes, Robert.
How are you? Thanks for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Good, thank you. Please proceed. I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, so I'm in the financial sector, fintech space.
Okay. Yes, please proceed, Robert.
Yeah, I'm in the fintech space. I just want to emphasize on knowledge economy, because we are hindered by the Procurement Act. So you see a lot of issues in the market. You trying to solve a challenge. You go to, let's say, Parastatal with an idea. The issue there, obviously, the moment you present them their problem, they want to take the idea and tender it out. So how do we move forward in basically creating more opportunity for others if things like that have been discouraged? Because the Copyright Act, anything that basically needs to come out needs to go to tender. So that's basically what I want to emphasize on. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for that. Me recognized Shopala Gombe. You've raised your hand. Please provide your comment, your input. Angombe, you seem to be on mute. Please unmute.
Jason, thank you for the opportunity, but I think I've already write my question, so it's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next hand that is up is from Florraine. Florraine, please provide your input.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, great.
Yes, good. Thank you, Mr. Kasuto. I just want to shed some light on enterprise development. I think the most significant constraint that we have got in that area at the moment that is really affecting the youth is the issue of land. So many youth with so many entrepreneurial ideas and they do not have access to land. So I think maybe the government really need to look really into this so that probably commercial land can be availed to potential entrepreneurs, because someone can have a brilliant idea, but then there's just no land for them to set up this. And if they go to rent like various places, renting is very expensive and most youth can't really afford. And again, another constraint that we have got, I'm speaking now from the angle of TVET graduates. I mentioned, I think during our first meeting on Monday, that yes, funding facilities are available at the DBN, for example. But then so many youths are unable to access that funding because the level of skill that most of the artisans, especially those ones that are graduating from the already existing VTCs, is not adequate or convincing enough to the DBN to actually release this funding for these artisans. Only a few of them, and I have it on record that most of them that actually access this funding are those ones that they have attended vocational training abroad. So I made a plea to government on Monday if they can consider constructing even just one VTC in the whole country, which will be able to absorb bright students from the already existing VTCs so that they can further their studies to the N4 up to the N6 levels, because it is only within these specific levels where actually artisans can actually be empowered with manufacturing skills. And that is one really one industry in Namibia that is really lacking. And then I want to also touch on the issue of consultations, that yes, so many youth are having ideas and they are really coming forth to engage our leaders in government. But then I think the response that we're getting from our leaders is really so much disheartening, because the only communication that we have got is through emails. But then leaders don't really seem to be really, cooperating with the youth. For example, I myself am the chairman of the Association of Unemployed Artisans in Namibia, a really good initiative that we have really co-founded with a lot of unemployed artisans, because we know that not all artisans can actually become entrepreneurs. There will always be a group of those artisans that will remain hanging, like just in the communities without jobs. And therefore we formed this type of association so that we approach government and say, look, we are faced with so much youth unemployment. Can you not at least spare some type of capital project for this group of unemployed artisans in the meantime? And really, it's so disheartening to really learn that government is really maybe not really serious with this initiative, because it is really one that I'm very much positive as chairman that will be able to solve unemployment in all 14 regions in the country. And also on the issue of awareness, I think it was already touched. I think when I was in the North some time ago, I tried to speak to a lot of youth about this credit guarantee scheme and other sort of fundings. But these guys are really lost. They don't know what is happening. And therefore, I think if pamphlets or even media can, other sources or other types of media can actually be utilized to actually, spread the word, okay? Hold town hall meetings, book holds, address the youth, what kind of facilities are available from government so that most or a lot of youth can actually be mobilized and actually participate. It is the only way that we're going to solve the unemployment situation in Namibia. With those few words, I thank you, Mr. Jonas, for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Florian, thank you for comments, for your input. Please, for everyone else, as we allow you into the chat, please let's keep our comments or questions succinct. And Anamutila, I recognize you. Please provide your input. Robert, your mic is still on. Can you mute? Okay. Anamutila. Okay. There seems not to be a response from Anamutila. Can I move on to Philemon Shikomba? Please provide your input.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Jason. How are you? Thank you so much.
Good,
For,
thank
can
you,
you hear me?
Philemon. How are you?
I'm good. Okay.
Great.
You can hear me?
Can hear you clearly.
Okay. So I would like to touch on 2 points. One is to support Josephine's idea on capacity building and connecting the locals to the Namibians in the diaspora, which I think is a very good idea because I have seen the value in the diaspora being exposed to the outside world for more than 10 years now. I can say there are so many Namibians who are equipped with, resources to contribute to our country. And if you see countries like Nigeria now that are progressing economically, it is because of the people that go out of their country and their ability to return to their country or to collaborate with their locals. So I think it's very, very important that there should be a deliberate, attempt to incorporate, that into ideas on creating opportunities for young Namibians. I like the comparison or the she made with the gentleman who passed away from NASA, and how it could have been a good opportunity to actually, connect him to young Namibians. It could have been a very good opportunity for growth. So that was my first point. My second point will be, I've heard a lot from this conversation. We are, talking about opportunities from outside, these Amazon comparisons and so on. So I feel like we need to incorporate more Namibian solutions for Namibian problems. What I mean by that is we need to be focused on creating or adding value to what we already have. Instead, we've seen the effects of the pandemic on the local economy because we rely so much on the outside world. So anything that, disconnects us from the outside world affects us really badly. And then if we can create opportunities for young people by adding value to what we already have, I think it will create an economy that is self-reliant, which is what I think Nina said, the lady from Stellenbosch. So she spoke a lot about, self-reliance and creating an economy that relies on what we have. So that is what I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that input, Philemon. Solomon Hay. Solomon.
Listen.
Hi, Solomon.
We can hear you, Saloma. Go ahead. Thank you. Good afternoon again
Solomon,
to
I can
everyone.
hear you. Solomon.
I think it's a very good conversation that we are having, and it's very much in line with how we intend to take the country forward. Now, I also want to thank the previous presenters, both Josephine and Nina, in terms of their inputs. But I want to sort of reflect on a few issues that were raised both on the Q&A and some in the chat room. Now, and specifically relating to the pillars in the economic advancement chapter. Now, macroeconomic stability, the issue that was raised was around that current debt metrics in terms of whether we have fallen short in terms of the target for Harambee Prospective Plan 1, and how that relates to how that will have an impact moving into the future, which is a relevant question as it relates to young people as well. Now, the current debt metrics is not a Namibian problem per se. Namibia's high debt metric is not isolated to our economic situation. It's a global phenomenon. I mean, if you compare the debt levels of countries like Mauritius in terms of where they are during this time, you will realize that they're equally as high. So what we really should focus on is rather the direction of debt in terms of where are we spending the money once we acquire new debt. And the aim is really to make sure that we move the debt towards the productive side of the economy. And through that, one is unable to service the debt because you would be productive, and through that, you'll be able to service the debt. So we should not be too alarmed in terms of what the current debt levels are. It's really because of the economic environment that we find ourselves in. And the bigger objective should be that how do we bring the debt down, but obviously by making sure that we spend the debt that we raise towards the productive side of the economy. The other issue that came out is there's always the conversation around the wage bill. And I have a slightly different take in terms of the wage bill, to the extent that the high wage bill is a consequence of government spending in personnel cost. So the question that we need to ask ourselves here, is that a liability or is it an investment? In my view, I think government has, it's an investment that government has put in the public sector by employing the number of people that it has. But what we need to do, and as part of the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2, is to make sure that we sort of start looking for the return on this investment in terms of this wage bill that we have. So the idea is that government, the public sector need to become efficient. They need to become more responsive, and they need to be able to respond to the needs of the country. So in my view, in as much as the conversation is around how large wage bill can be sustained, I really think that we need to start looking for the return on this investment. One of the other issues that came to the fore as well was the issue around the competitive edge in terms of the Namibian economy. And it's very much an idea that speaks to the young people in terms of innovation. Now, if you look at and this is some of the notes that I shared with James, if you look at the World Competitive Index indicators, you would see that Namibia scores quite high in terms of its financial market or financial system, and whether it's investment-friendly environment. So sort of in those scores, we do quite well. But where we struggle a bit is in areas of innovation. And I think, I don't know, the gentleman from the fintech economy who spoke about how we need to nourish entrepreneurship through new innovation. And it's exactly what we need to do. And Harambee Prosperity Plan 2 will definitely look at bringing some of this innovation to the fore to make sure that when young people are joining the mainstream, we are transforming the economy by creating these opportunities for them to flourish. And innovation is definitely the activity of young people, and there should be specific intervention to make sure that we promote that. The other issue that I think was raised by Josephine is perhaps the mismatch in terms of funding. On the one side, you do have sort of funding from GIPF or as a fund manager. You've got an allocation, but there's a struggle in really finding projects that one can fund. There's a need to go into a bit of more work in respect of bringing some projects to a viable and investable stage. And this should be a deliberate intervention in making sure that we can unlock this very value. It can't be that we are a developing economy, but we somehow mirror the sort of criteria that get used to fund what we refer to as your typical advanced economies. So, and I think there's real scope for us to promote the developmental component into the funding value chain to make sure that entities that have high growth potential are sort of taken care of. I mean, and I'm going to take an example. There are many others. For instance, the issue, the company LEFA, right? The transport company. Now, if you look at LEFA, it's got the same profile as an Uber, for instance. And Uber might not come to Namibia because of market dynamics. But we've got an Uber for us, which is LEFA. And Uber might not go to a country like Botswana precisely because of market size as well. Now, to what extent are we able to support companies like LEFA to export their services to countries like Botswana? And this is where the sort of funding should consider flowing towards some of these high sectors that have got high growth potential. And I think generally I'm very happy with the interactions. And maybe a last one, Jason, if I may, it's really the issue around the artisans. You know, we've got NIMT in Arandis, right? And so essentially what NIMT does, it prepares and promotes vocational training. And we've got a port at Wolfish Bay. And at that port, there's a lot of vessels that sort of get fixed there, get repaired there, and that sort of thing. To what extent do we have coordination between the feeder and the actual utilization of the skill? So, and I think what the gentleman spoke to with regard to the vocational center was really to say that there's a need to integrate some of the skills into the real sectors. And we enjoy benefits of the shipping industry because they come and some of them dock at our port and they are there for a certain period of time. And some of the mechanical work can in fact be done there. And this is why it's important that we could use some of this, the named Inarandes to service or to feed the ship repair industry at the port. So these are some of the coordination that the HPPII will look at in terms of creating real opportunities and measuring
Solomon,
them.
thank you for touching on quite a number of key points. Sorry, Solomon. Okay. With that, I'd like to just close this round for now of questions and
thanks, Jason,
and the
for all the
presentation.
contributions that you
Over
have
to you.
brought forward. We're taking notes. Some of them are recommendations and suggestions. Others are direct questions. Maybe I should pick up where Salome left off on the issue of unemployed artisans in the Kanda Mwetulundila's question. I think initiative to organize all the unemployed artisans who are looking for economic opportunities into association, Florian, and I commend you for that. We have received submissions from young people under the chairmanship of Florian at the Association for Unemployed Artisans of Namibia. And this is a proposal that government has embraced to the level of His Excellency the President, who in beginning of August established a technical working group that is chaired by the Director General of the National Planning Commission, Honorable Ovid Kanjoze, and myself as a member, and really an interministerial, intergovernmental technical working group. And our objective is to formulate a truly national and inclusive framework that can empower artisans to access public tender opportunities within the regions, but also for them to become beneficiaries through subcontracting and employment opportunities. That is a framework that government is seized with at the moment, and I can provide assurances that you are going to receive feedback publicly on this matter imminently, I can say by next month at least. So I just wanted to share that information that these engagements are material. We receive your contributions and we are acting on them, just like we are doing on this particular case for the artisans. There was a comment in the chat room about leveraging the talent and the cultural industry for export, because it's a low investment opportunity, but it can create high impact. A lot of young people are in that space already, and definitely these are some of the emerging issues that we are going to reflect in the new HPP sectors for growth. This one is already, the creative and the cultural industries is already reflected in our trade and services policy, which is on its way to cabinet for promotion for export. And we think that that would help to address informality. There are a lot of young people operating in informality in this sector, and we need to mainstream it into the formal. There were a lot of questions on, or comments rather, on the youth enterprises in the regions. And what I would like to share is that, yes, government, as much as government has a high public wage bill, which was inherited and also part of a balancing act to create economic opportunities, government is the biggest employer of opportunity. But you will agree with me that governments are not intended to create jobs. Jobs are generated by the private sector. What we did in the 2016 Harambee Prosperity Plan under the Youth Enterprise Development Pillar is we created a special program to facilitate the establishment of enterprises for young people because we had some insight on the limitation to set up their own establishment. Initiative with 12 million of Namibia. Yes, the one exists. The process was solicited proposals that went through a review and a selection and an approval process. And these enterprises were then handed over to the Development Bank of Namibia to finalize the viability, the feasibility of their ideas, to make sure that this is not a sunk investment. And a lot of them have tapped into that capital pot. But it talks to a bigger problem, and that is talking about rural economic development and how we can create more opportunities for our young people in the rural economy and in the regions, so that we can also stem the rural-urban migration. In the Harambee Prosperity Plan, we were looking at incentivizing industry, big corporations to set up their factories in the regions, and then they can absorb and create opportunities for some of our young people there. But it also is a procurement issue, and we are looking at how to leverage procurement so that it can strengthen the regional basis. If you take the example of the artisans as a case in point, artisans should be employed in the regions to specifically. Point by Robert Chipanga about the mid procurement, which works on a solist. But innovation is the mother of invention. So we have a lot of young inventors and innovators now who have got solutions for government, but they're unable to access the market because it has not been solicited. And this is an area that requires reform in our Public Procurement Act. We are aware of that prohibition, and I do believe that we're going to find ways around it. We take note, and I think my colleague from the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade has addressed the concerns about bringing business registration closer to the regions. Yes, we are leveraging technology. We are working on the one-stop shop, which is supposed to be an online portal for you to get your business registered. But we also appreciate the digital divide and lack of access for people in the regions to access these opportunities. But I can provide assurances that we have made progress from the first HPP to where we are now in terms of setting up the systems. But as Nina rightly said, operationalizing some of these systems and getting them onto market is where the delays have been experienced, and the delays are felt mostly by you. So to the point of my colleague Salomo, who we are working together on this project, on this policy formulation exercise, is how we can have a more efficient public sector, how we can gain a quicker return on that investment, how we can be more efficient in implementing some of these programs that we have. My last point is also just a comment in reaction to say that the TVET sector is one that has leapfrogged in the last 4 years. It has exceeded the targets that we set in the first HPP. We've expanded not only the intake capacity, we have also extended the footprint across the country. We have broken ground in a number of regions from Kavango to Kunene. We have broken ground. I think the challenge here is really the financial constraints to complete the construction exercise. But one significant exercise that has been completed for TVET is the curriculum reform of 2016, where we have modernized the TVET curriculum. It's a 5-year cycle review. And I think young people need to be pushing for similar curriculum reforms for traditional institutions of higher learning, like UNAM and NUST as well. TVET is really has led in that space, and it's commendable. Let me submit here to allow other speakers to provide their responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Desiree. And thank you for fielding quite a number of the questions and comments that came from the chat rooms. Just in brief, we take note of quite a number of valuable inputs from you. The issues around the need. So they seem to be, and that's nationally strengthen Namibian in compete, or and how can we promote these entities to be more sustainable? We take note of that input. I may direct that question to Josephine. And there is input on our minerals policy. Moses is asking how can we maximize the benefit of our natural resources for greater public sector or government participation or ownership in terms of our mineral resources. Again, that question touches on policy. So I'll leave it open to the floor. Desiree, you can perhaps come in, or Nina, if you'd like to come in on that one. Another relevant question that came up was implementing standards around our food sector, in addition to the current SABS standards that we have. What is the potential thereof, and is that a viable avenue? Perhaps Nina, you can touch on that. I know Ndita is also in the room, so please raise your hand if you'd like to also respond to some of these questions. Josephine?
Hi, Jason. I think I've answered the inward question on the chat. But really, I think especially Philemon has raised the issue that we look outside more, and I definitely agree that we need to focus in-house. But there is nothing wrong with learning from the best, looking what has worked elsewhere and applying it to our situation and seeing how it can fit. We have examples of, I think it's Tambula online, which was established recently during COVID. That is literally an Amazon. And if you can expand that to include Namibian products, not only what is in the retailers at the moment, and actually expand that to be able to export these goods to other SADC countries, to other African countries, that is a marketing platform that you are creating for your own product. So I think we definitely have solutions inwards, which, and again, I think it's Solomon who mentioned Lefa, which is similar to Uber. So we can look at what works outside. We don't have to use what is exactly outside, but we can tailor them to suit our situation at home. So I definitely agree that there's a lot of potential for us to make our solutions at home. The other comment, I think, on minerals, I have raised this in my presentation to say that we definitely need to probably review our mineral resources agreements. Of course, there's a lot involved that goes into that, ensuring that both the investors and the country are taken care of, and you're not necessarily scaring away your investors with your policies that might be too strict. But at the same time, you also really want to ensure that the country benefits, and you can use these funds to then fund other avenues. You can use it to fund entrepreneurial ventures. You can use it for the equipment aid scheme. You can use it to fund scholarships and all these other mentoring and coaching initiatives. So I think there's definitely a need for review for our mineral resources agreements. I agree with that, but perhaps someone from the policy office can expand more on that. I think I'll leave the other questions to Nina to explore.
Thank you, Josephine. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you. So in terms of, maybe let's start with the standards, the comment that was made in terms of standards for food specifically, and I made a comment also then on pharmaceuticals, because I don't think we necessarily need to re-engineer, because these standards, these global standards on this, and they are there for specific reasons. But I do think it could be valuable to look at how are these Namibian specific, also to enable market growth and kind of market access, at least at first, to a local market. In terms of exports, if we think exports and kind of developing market, or developing the market and access to other markets, then international standards will in any case be required. But for the Namibian market, I think it could be relevant to kind of have that discussion at least, and say what are standards that could be specific, that we can actually improve or increase official access to market because of specific local standards. Food, pharmaceuticals, there might even be others. So that's, yeah, I think something that we should definitely take note of. And then in terms of the policy, I'm also probably not, but I'll take a stab at it. So with the minerals and exactly kind of beneficiation, or what we do with that, maybe I shouldn't take a stab. In terms of employment, I just think something like NEAP, and that's why we need to gain clarity in terms of employment, because there was a comment specifically on who we employ if mines are sold to companies from outside, or specifically if it's not government owned as well. I think that's part of why we need a policy for equitable employment, so that we ensure that Namibian people that's unemployed with possible skills, or then skills development, will actually gain employment in corporates, in mining, in the different industries within Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. I'm really encouraging the regions to come through with your questions. We noted quite a number of regions in the audience, so please, the chat room is open. The Q&A box is open for you to please contribute and provide your questions. There's quite a lot of commentary around the opportunities via DBN for young graduates and young people. We are aware that DBN, in conjunction also with government or Ministry of Finance, launched a couple of schemes that target young people and young graduates. Perhaps I can hand over to Desiree just to expand a bit on that, as it seems to be quite a point in the chat room.
Thanks, Jason. I'll be very quick. In the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2016, Youth Enterprise Development, we wanted to overcome the hurdle of non-collateralized lending. Unfortunately, pursuant to the launch of the HPP, the SME bank underwent foreclosure, and we lost the dedicated development finance institution that was addressing non-collateralized lending for SMEs. So that function and that mandate was put back to the call centers in 2019 in 30 million schemes. One is the skills-based lending facility, which I think received in excess of 30 million. And this is a preferential scheme for young professionals. Whether you're a doctor or an artisan, you come with a qualification that is skills-based and you can access the funding. It has got preferential clauses, preferential rates. It's limited to young people under the age of 35. So it's not open to any business person, but specifically to youth. Then we have got the credit guarantee scheme, which has faced some delays because the way that it is set up, financial commercial financial institutions need to have subscribed to the credit guarantee scheme. What it means is that you may approach First National Bank for an SME loan of 1 million, 5 million, but you might not have the collateral to secure that loan with FNB. And this is where FNB would apply on your behalf to DBN, to government, to guarantee your loan. And that is really the remit of that SME credit scheme. It's capitalized in excess of 90 million. And what remains is the challenge account, which is a business mentorship coaching and advisory service. And we realized we had to do this because SMEs from 36 months, they don't make it. There's a very high fatality rate. And obviously the banks lose a lot of money because it's a lot of lost investment. So when funding with business advisory, mentorship, coaching to increase your chances of success, that is, in a high-level summary, the SME financing strategy, which was prescribed under the Harambee Prosperity Plan. And it has received a measure of success, but we know that the funding need is so much greater than the 130 million, especially for startups. And that is the solutions that we need to look forward to in the next term. How do we fund innovators, startup entrepreneurs who don't have any capital?
Thank you, Desiree. I recognize Lazarus. Your hand is up. Please proceed with your input. Lazarus Amukeshe.
Hello? Can you guys hear me? Hello, Jason?
Please proceed, Lazarus.
Okay, I think it's maybe the
Can
connection.
hear you.
Okay, I think it's probably the connection. But thank you so much, Jason. Thank you to the youth advisor for organizing this. Allow me to stand on already established observed protocols. I think I've three points that or additions that I'd like to make. And the first one is mainly on Texas. Maybe it's because that's somewhat my specialty, but I think it's about time that we consider revamping our Income Tax Act. I think it's about 40 years old now, and a couple of provisions within the Income Tax Act doesn't really talk to the current economy. If we look at example, I think I'd like to give an example of countries that we have, even in Africa, even outside Africa. For example, when the whole coronavirus started, there was a sudden call from the various Ministry of Finance across the world to, first of all, reduce taxes. Taxes were drastically reduced, and therefore the spending power of people was somewhat improved in that end, and businesses were somewhat given somewhat available cash flow to float around while the virus is around. So I think it's about time we maybe try and improve on that, on the Income Tax Act. We have provisions such as the pension fund. I mean, the pension fund contribution, for example, that has been in place for 13 years. Another provision, I mean, the Minister of Finance, then Kalle Schledwein, had proposed that that be moved, but I mean, it doesn't even feature in the current budget now, because up to now, you're only allowed to save up to 40,000 a year, which won't be taxed. So I think, in looking at the current realities of how to fund the retirement, 40,000 quite such a minimal amount. And also on issues around small assets, for example, that is also contained in the Income Tax Act, that you can deduct. You can deduct, for example, if you are in the hospitality industry, the spoons, you use them for like over, say, roughly 2 years. But then because the Act does not allow you to deduct those small items in one go, then you are allowed, I mean, you are forced to someone carry all these things, carry all these costs for a longer period of time. Then that also now adds to the whole admin burden, and it's just I think it's about time we scrap it up and then just lump it up into one deduction. Also on, and I think I'll still want to go back, maybe I don't want to make it such a big issue on the whole investment from outside and investment from inside thing. But I've seen, or at least what a particular example is what happened in Okahau, for example, last weekend, where we see the video that was circulating on social media, where we see the police trying to load up a vendor into the van. I don't know what the cause was, but if we cannot provide say meaningful business environment for even our local vendors to operate freely without them being arrested and chased up, because I think the main reason why they are in those spaces where they are not supposed to be is mainly because the facilities that they're supposed to be there are not there, and that's why they are going there illegally to just ensure that they get the customers that they need to get. Because if you have a central point like single quarters and all the other places, and Okuriangava, these designated places, and not a whole lot of people go to such places to buy those things, then in the end it defeats the whole purpose of having many vendors into such areas. I mean, as much as we'd like to have all these setups around. And then on the other thing, to touch a little bit on government debt, I think it's also very important that the Bank of Namibia, probably with the assistance of either DBN, I don't know if that will fall within the mandate, but the development of Namibia, particularly to allow the normal public to participate in the taking up of government securities. Those are your normal treasury bills and your bonds. If they can lower that amount from the current 10,000, for example, and from 50,000 for a government bond, I think that will be better, because our analysis has shown that individuals, mainly even the young people, take their hard-earned money, put it in the bank, and then the bank takes it up and then put it in government bonds, and then they earn a higher margin compared to what they would have, what they're earning the banks take the money, they put it in the treasury bills, the government bonds, and then they earn a higher margin, and then the people's money that is actually in the bank doesn't earn that much of an interest. So I think if that door can be opened up for people, particularly to, even with the little amount, just imagine if we had ability for a normal person, the same way you put 250 in the money market account, you can do that in government securities. I think that will open up quite, or extend the benefits of owning up government securities to a much wider audience. And then the third point, I think, just again to touch on Salomo's point, is the named example he gave, the named guys that we have in Arandes. So if we can introduce also, South Africa has what we call a learnership allowance, that you allow a tax deduction if you take up a couple of school leaving or graduate leaving people to work for you, and then you get a tax allowance on that. I think if we can also introduce it, I think we'll probably see a couple of corporates taking up a whole lot of unemployed youth, trying to get as much benefit on the tax. I think you can agree with me here that not the whole lot of people have to pay tax. And I think just coming down to the tax issue again, if for example, if SMEs are given a much lower rate, they are allowed several deductions that are beneficial to them. But because imagine if you are having as an SME, you start off in the year, you make $300 profit, and then you take 32% of that to pay to the taxman. I think you can agree with me that you're left with very little that you can reinvest into your business. If we can lower the tax rate maybe to something below 30, particularly for SMBs, I think we'll possibly see a much better growth. Like Desiree rightly put it, that there's a high fatality rate for SMEs, and I think mainly it's because on the cash flow part is mainly the one that hits them hard. So if you take away such a bigger chunk in taxes, in as much as they are spread over a period of time, I think it will also help cushion them against a whole lot of liquidity risks that bigger businesses are not always acquainted to. And also on the debt issue, I think the debt levels could be improved if we get serious with the tax collections. On and on, we hear that several international companies have dodged taxes one way or another, but we've seen very little coming from the Ministry of Finance. So if we can balance this quickly, just draw up a basic calculation, debt increases when there's less tax collected. So if we cannot do much on the tax collection side, debt levels will continue going up. And as much as we want our debt levels to be contained, if we don't do quite well on the tax collection side as well, because I'm sure, and I think I'm very sure of this, that there's very, very minimal collection of taxes in the country. And I'm not saying this to go tax kapana guys and all, in as much as they're supposed to be taxed, but if you focus really on corporates that are dodging taxes, I think there's a wider opportunity there for us to get that income back into our state coffers, and that can be pushed into development. Then I think on my very last point is to support local production. I'm sorry, maybe this was already emphasized because I joined quite in the middle of the whole conversation. So the local production, I've interviewed in my capacity as member of the media, I've interviewed a couple of SMEs that have on and on told me how they are closing down, specifically because there is no support from the locals. I think if we can also highlight to our fellow Namibians that where we buy is very important, I think it will assist a lot. Because if we don't keep buying our local goods, then there won't be local empowerment, and then we'll keep on sending our pension money abroad, because pension money needs to look for where there is opportunities, and opportunities can only come when we support those initiatives. So I think there's very important need for us to support our local SMEs. I think with that, let me thank you all for listening, and over to you. Thanks. Can you hear me? I think I'm done.
Lazarus, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments and for that worthy contribution around quite a number of things that you touched on, from tax reforms and incentives to issues around capital flight and strengthening our and deepening our capital market. I think I'd want to hand
Thank you very
some of the
much,
issues
moderator, and
so
thank you,
we
Lazarus, for that contribution.
are part of the audience to all some of those pertinent points, Lazarus. Desiree?
Double-edged sword, right? Because you rightly point revenue you generate. At the same time, you need to create, catalyze, and to reinvest, restart. So we hear you on tax reform. It's coming through. You're making suggestions on incentives, packages for business, also to recruit young graduates. I think the point, put a lifeline to those, and then how do we create? I think the best people is either much in line with what Salomo was saying, that borrowing is not a problem, provided you're channeling it into productive economic investments. Over to you, Salomo or James, through the moderator.
Yes, please come in.
Yes, thank you very much. Jason, I'm not quite certain. I couldn't get both.
Salome, go ahead.
Yes, Desiree and yourselves. I think the network is starting to really play with us. But be that as it may, Leslie has very good points, and I think tax reforms definitely is on the agenda. I mean, all over the world, you would see that there has been success stories around tax reforms, and especially to generate revenue, because that's then what funds the deficits and also essentially government expenditure. I mean, I think it's very good points that we are taking on board in terms of the solutions that will come out of this. The other issue that I see that we've not really spoken to, Chairperson, is the issue around agriculture as a sector for growth, and also because of its ability to absorb a significant number of people in the labor force. I mean, if you look at the structure of our economy, you would see that the biggest contribution in our economy essentially comes from the tertiary sector. Now, ideally, what you want to see is how can young people get involved in the agri sector, and in the agri sector in terms of food production and also for local production. And once the products becomes competitive enough, we can definitely consider the export market. Now, what is key there is, I think it's an issue that Josephine also raised as it relates to the retail charter, where we are waiting for signatures to sign up on the charter. But I think in terms like this, there's a need to be deliberate in terms of being change agents, especially when the economy need to move towards the growth trajectory. Maybe the voluntary retail charter is not the answer. We need to be a bit more deliberate and say that, look, it's no longer voluntary, but there's serious commitment towards the retail shelf space for local production. And through this, we can move towards the necessary growth that we would want to see. Now, we would also be aware that our economy has not grown for the past 3 out of the last 4 years. And obviously tomorrow the NSA is releasing the GDP for quarter 2, which won't be a pleasant number. But as part of Harambee Prosperity Plan 2, I think it's important that perhaps we consider looking at a growth target to say, what is it, where do we want to go in terms of our GDP growth? And link this growth to some of these sectors that we are referring to, where we'd want to see transformation take root and promote youth innovation. So once we've got the growth target, it essentially gives us an objective to work towards and say, if we have to grow towards a 3 or 5% in the next 2 years, what it would take in terms of the different sectors? To what extent would the agriculture sector have to grow to be able to meet this objective of 3 to 5%? So it's to that extent that we should sort of intervene, or rather provide guidance as part of the Harambee to have the meaningful economic impact that we want to see, and especially towards the youth, because they are the majority in the population, and at the same time also I think like Desiree said, that for every 2 young people in this country, 1 of them is unemployed. So it's those sort of interventions that needs to be deliberate and not necessarily be too much on the periphery. We need to intervene directly, and I think there's also a new narrative if we read on new economic literature that speaks to the entrepreneurial state. And some of the issues that Lazarus raised, some of the issues that Josephine raised, and also Nina in terms of capacity, efficiency, and all of that, speak to the entrepreneurial state. And the entrepreneurial state needs to be efficient, needs to be capacitated, needs to be able to provide the necessary direction to get us back on the growth trajectory. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Solomon, for that valuable input. Before I take the last two hands, looking at time, there will be a poll that will be sent. Please participate in that poll. It's really important that we gauge your view in terms of that. I also wanted us to, in terms of our comments, your comments are being captured. No one is left out. Your comments are being captured. We must also have an understanding of the reality we face when 57% of our workforce is actually in the informal sector. It would be good to get some contributor thinking in terms around that sector as well. Inamutila, you have been quite patient. I see your hand is up. Please provide your input. Inamutila? Okay, we'll move on to Dion Shekuza. I see your hand is up. Please make your input.
Thank you, Jason. Greetings to everyone, and I also stand and recognize all observed protocol. I just wanted to ask a very simple question, perhaps being a little bit uninformed on it. If mistaken, you guys could enlighten my ignorance on it. I just took a look a little bit on PIPA's intellectual property protection procedure. And I'm not too sure, which is why I'm saying maybe you can correct me, but if I understand correctly, one first needs to register a business, which starts with registering the name and so forth. And then after you are formally registered, then only can you protect an intellectual idea. I wanted to, that's my understanding. And if it's not as such, probably I can be corrected. But if it's as such, I wanted to suggest maybe we consider a system that looks at also protecting first your idea, because it's not always that you have a business canvas model prepared around your business, and not for us to be too invested in first protecting your business name and stuff, but first looking at the idea you are bringing to the table. Sometimes a young person really has a good idea, but they lack a process through which they can protect it in terms of finances, because it's quite a costly procedure to also set up a business in full, which is why some young people would use these intermediary companies that do registration for you, but their packages are not always affordable, especially for the youth in the rural areas, as you mentioned. Sometimes you can have an idea that you don't want to execute, and somebody could have the resources to execute it. Maybe that could also create a small economy to say, if we start protecting ideas and you're interested in business ideas, but you got the funding, you don't have the ideas, you could do a business, some type of agreement with the person who conjured up a thought, and it's protected under them, and they can probably sell you the rights and so forth. I was just trying to suggest something of that line, because I've seen we don't really invest a lot in the intellectual idea more than the business around the idea is what we focus on. But I just wanted to suggest that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dion. Thank you for that. And the thinking around ideas and protecting trademark is obviously to ensure that they also become tradable. But thank you very much for that input. Where we can, your input is all being captured, and we will be able to see where feedback can be provided. I think for the sake of time, colleagues, I will now hand over to the rapporteurs to summarize the points captured during today's discussion. Again, thank you all for the fruitful and productive contributions that you have provided. Let me hand over to the rapporteurs.
If I unmute. Yeah, I did unmute the video. Oh, video on. Oh, okay. Thank you, Jason. To conclude, or to rather give you the summary of what has been discussed today, we will, when I say we, Ndapandula and I will kickstart off with the first presenter, who was Ms. Josephine Shikongo, who basically spoke to us about the crafting a common youth agenda presentation. What she's basically concentrated on was she rather highlights the 4 sub-pillars: 12 desired outcome, 54 active, 29 executed, and then of course 54% executions rate. Areas of which she also focused on what should actually be continued, the rural youth enterprise, regional project, land provision effort, investment promotion bills. The wage bills came out very strongly, credit guarantee schemes, as well as the BIPA that was also highlighted. In terms of looking ahead, she also further mentioned about the regional projects, the land provisioned efforts, investment promotion bills, the rural youth enterprise, also BIPA here, credit guarantee, wage bills. Looks like it's repeating itself over there. Pardon me for that. Unmet targets, anchor public debts, maintain and improve international credit ranged, create a minimum of 800 new jobs in manufacturing sector, ensure Namibia is rated as most competitive by 2020. Those are the things that are unmet targets, as well as establish SME. That she has basically touched on is the revenue and expenditure, entrepreneurial focus, quality, the new economic empowerment, quickly the NAMRA, the public enterprise sovereign wealth, future in terms of efficiency, public enterprises, public-private partnership, which is also the triple P, corruptions and wastage. And then of course, she also spoke about the entrepreneurships in terms of the funding, in terms of the retail charter, in terms of the access to market, mentoring and coaching, as well as the barriers to entries. And then of course, she also touched base on the new equitable EEB, where she further highlights on the ownerships, management control, human resource and skills development, value additions and technology, entrepreneurial development and marketing, social responsibility, and then of course investment in research, pardon me, international developed capacity, Namibian experts, and then she recommended by saying expand SME funding beyond DB years, entry, the improve access to credit concludes the presentation of Ms. Josephine. Moving on. On the other hand, as a that she had a heading on the response, which her focus area was on the macroeconomic stability, economic transformation, youth enterprise development, as well as the And then what economic stability she highlights: stakeholders, capitalism, social development considerations, local and international effects. In terms of the economic transformations, green, secular, fourth industrial revolutions, digital, equitable employment, those were the areas that she touched on. In terms of the youth enterprise, the democratizations in access education, agility, funding, instruments, and model scaling are needed to basically focus on how to ensure access to education and information sharing. These were basically contributed. In terms of the economic competitiveness, the innovative economic system, market. With market here, she highlights the label, the size, the product access, enabling environment, people. Do we have skills and help in there? Rethink we need, and of course, if we look at the economic advancement pillar in terms of what is required, there were three areas that came out, which was presenting the effective governance, the infrastructure development, as well as the international cooperations. Here she put a lot of emphasis on building trust. What to refocus on in terms of governance, quickly information management system, policy implementation, monitoring and evaluations, with emphasis on the four. Funding, on the other hand, she highlighted the financial management, the financial instrument here, enabling an environment for private investment, foreign as well as local. And then, of course, what also came out in her presentation was the training and development, of which the another abbreviation here, startup support coachings, and the public-private partnership, which is also standing for HPPII, land and existing building use, business management and business model, and then of course another abbreviation here of the ICT enabling internet provision, funding instrument. And another area that I would like to also touch base quickly was the challenges that we've basically extracted from the chat room. And then a question was posed, and I know the moderator also put emphasis on that, as well as all the 121 youth and active in all, and then of course on the 121 youth enterprises, urging government to work on them to be fully active in the region. That was one. And then of course another question was what Namibian products are produced on a large scale informally, what it be, or whether, I think the participants wanted to say, would it be crops? And then, of course, another question was on Startup Namibia. Does it support youth projects? An initiative co-owned by more than, I guess, the youth, for example. And then, of course, the number 4, what are measures in place to incorporate Namibian solution for Namibian problems? And then the suggestion was given there to be careful with economic interventions. Then, of course, the as Namibian was another African continental, of which on this one trade agreement, and also already small market. How do we position ourselves to also leverage and benefit from this is as an exporter and not just as a logistical hub or a transit area. And then of course finally the HPPII, this particular pillar performed badly because state-owned enterprises are struggling to make profit because there is, while the competitors are not as regulated. What came out very strongly from the chat room in terms of the recommendation was that Startup Namibia has regional outreach component, target those outside Windhoek. With what is worth noting is identification has been made in the following areas: Oshana, Kavango, Raras, I wish I could make that sound, but Karas, as well as Erongo over there. and then of course HPP to discuss with governors and councils registration. I know that BIPA to take long enroll to Vintuk. I think that's invest in research is also very important. Another suggestion is for the startup to be in Kunene, especially Ocho as a town. And then of course VTC in Ocho or institutions for the youth also. And then of course DBN must be empower awareness youth that also came out very soon and improve on and frustrating the need regions to take also very strongly from the chat room, looking for ways to increase economic activity to be self-reliant, benefiting from the international reactions. For example, increasing our manufacture is also coming from BIPA here, the company registration facility online, and then of course further recommend funds linked to those SADC activities. There were a lot of things, contribution that came from the chat room, youth, joinery needed, very much needed, youth studying both the joinery and carpentry has built others in the process. The Namibian investment promote a fine participant was basically sharing. Participants further mentioned that the law is important to adequately regulate and promote investment. Here, building investment with confidence, and then of course, capacity building of network with groundbreaking Namibia in diaspora. And then, of course, on ESME funding, suggesting a pooling capital from various sources into one or two seizable fund, which hires professional enterprises, developers with a good track records, not only deployed the capacity into the SME space, but also to hear about the of labeling enterprises tracking back to fund humility, transparency as well. It continues with ESME fundings. Such initiatives can raise funding from other sources. Here the participants just saying that participants can basically share the models that have, and then of course in sector collaborations. On the plan, Namibia Enterprise to here is on the track. Consultancy can also be given the necessary skills. They say a data-based and information system, local, like a local sharing experiences is also something that also came out very strong. Analyze plus create plus find solution relevant to Namibia. And then of course on the food productions without wasting the standard in food chain standards. So just some of the things that basically is really catching up, and that we are in. This is a very important. I know that we've already touched that as rapporteurs, we have captured what they have highlighted. The question was, do we have manufacturing and sector we support as a country is a question. And then of course the participant feels a lot can actually be done if youth are empowered to manufacture product locally. And then of course, in terms of guidance, a participant has been working on an e-commerce project, not knowing where or who to approach. Acquiring land and a farm through Ministry of Land seen as a challenge for the upcoming entrepreneurs. And I think this is also what came out there. Then another question is, how can government assist financial those who want to transform their Omahangu field into a profitable green scheme project? Also came out over there. Same participants strongly believe a lot can actually be done if youth are empowered in manufacturing locally. There are 121 rural youth enterprises in Kavango West and Kavango East regions coming up with horticulture idea that was came out very strongly. To conclude, as was.
Thank you so much.
In conclusion, my colleague over here, to conclude in terms of the on land, and the government needs to look at it so that youth consultations are not quite compatible from the government side on types of programs available, focus on creating what the country already have, the opportunities for the young people. We must focus more on how to move the debt towards the productive sides of the economy so that the country can serve as the debt. And then of course, the question on the wage bill, the higher wage bill is an investment. We just need to make sure there is a return on the investment. On the competitive edge, Namibia does score quite high in terms of its competitive system. Fundings are there, but there is a need to bring some projects to a viable stage. And then, of course, a suggestion would be to revamp the income tax act, and then, of course, tax incentives for new graduates to get into the job market. And then, of course, offer some level of tax reform and reduction relief, something worth looking at as well. How young people can get involved in agri sector, also give space for local production. Consider looking at a GDP growth target where we want to go for each sector. And then, of course, finally, with regards to intellectual property, consider a system that first protect your idea. I submit. Moderator. Jason.
Inamuvurwa, thank you so much for the comprehensive capturing of today's session. It's much appreciated. So is the transparency. I'd like to now give an opportunity to Desiree to close the session and highlight to everyone what the next steps would be. Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you to our repertoires for that comprehensive summary record of the contributions that we have received here today. There's no dispute that national development planning should result in progress. It's about impact. It's about tangible improvement in the lives of others. And we want to give you that assurance that that is the intention here. We appreciate and we understand the feedback that we can spend a lot of time planning, but implementing is what really matters. One of the biggest lessons learned from the first Harambee Prosperity Plan is the performance delivery, implementation, oversight, reporting, monitoring, and evaluation function, which is going to be significantly strengthened in the second term. This is important because we need to get the priority right, and we need to get it right because of the even more scarce environment that we're operating in. So today, I believe you have met the obligation, you have met the opportunity to provide policy inputs. I believe that policies that are designed for a young nation should be greatly informed by the beneficiaries and collaborators. So I think we have met this opportunity, and I want to appreciate you for coming prepared, for coming informed, for bringing your perspectives, for doing so in a respectful manner, and also for doing so with clarity of mind and purpose. I want to assure you that at next week's validation process, we are going to look at the framework of what the next plan can look like. Our consultations are not happening in isolation. Many stakeholders are being consulted across the country, in government, in different sectors, and we, the youth sector, have made our contribution. We will put it all together into a policy framework, and that policy framework is going to be represented to those of you who will accept that invitation. And through that process, we want to build consensus on what the priority and the agenda is for the second term. We can expect His Excellency the President to reveal his launch, to launch his plan imminently in the third quarter of this year. Before I close and give my thanks, I want to give you a little bit of homework. You've spent the whole afternoon with us, but I just want to admit that I think I need more help. And the homework really is, if we had to give a name to our common agenda, what could it be? It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a hashtag, but what do we call our aspiration? What is it that we want to see? Is it something that we're doing? It's you've got a bit of creative license. I take note that Lazarus and Josephine were talking a lot about incentives. And I'm also going to incentivize you that whoever submits the selected name for our common youth agenda, there will be a reward, a befitting reward for your creative genius. So that's the homework. How do you submit? You can either drop me an email. The email details are available on my social media channels. You could DM us, you could write to us, whichever format you prefer. We are quite accessible. So that is the homework, is what should we call our common youth agenda for us as young Namibians, something that we can relate to. The validation workshop will take place on the 30th of September, but in case you are interested in other pillars of the Harambee Prosperity Plan, on Friday we're going to be discussing social progression, same time, 2 to 5 o'clock. On Monday, a bit earlier, we'll start at 10 in the morning until 12 in the afternoon. We'll discuss infrastructure development. So these are the last two remaining pillars. Today's session marks the end of the third pillar, and we can only say thank you for making it a success. I would also appreciate my team. I have a lot of colleagues in the back end who have supported with the technical aspects and the record keeping, and they have made sure that we could have a glitch-free event as far as possible. Thank you very much to our presenters, to our able moderator, and to all of you participants for taking the time. Truly, you are being patriotic citizens and participating in this national exercise. To my fellow young people, I just want to say that we understand the times we're in. We know that it is not easy. I want to encourage you to be strong and to remain positive. And our president said in his State of the Nation address that true character is revealed during times of crisis. So this is a defining hour for us, but we are going to overcome, and we can do it when we work together. There is life after COVID, agenda that will thrive again. I can affirm commitment to walk the due there. And I think can officially adjourn today's session. We look forward to seeing some of you on Friday afternoon, same time, same place. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy.